This is the Modcast. Welcome, everybody. My name is Gabe Anderson. This is my co-host, Jake Overall Anderson. Ah!
We are kind of like brothers in a way.
Yep. Jake Overall, because I'm an idiot. And this is the podcast about modifying stuff.
It is the Modcast. We are here to talk about modifying anything and everything. How we feel about it, what it's done for us in our lives, what it's done for people we know, and just putting some information out there for everybody else to chew on.
Yeah. Sometimes we're going to be talking about, why we modify stuff, what we modify. We'll probably have some of our friends on at some point in time and let them talk about their monster creations of, stupidity a lot of the time, in all honesty. Ourselves included. Yeah, it's just, an outlet for us to talk about modifying and every aspect of it. I mean, any way you think about modifying, we really want to try and touch on it.
So, on the topic of modifying, tell me about your car.
My car, I have a 2009 Subaru Impreza WRX Premium Sedan. It's a nice mouthful. My car, the premium portion, I have heated seats, a sunroof, and it comes with a fancy little body kit from the factory. Yeah, I mean, it's a real fun car. It has a couple of bolt-ons, downpipe, top mount. It's got a Pro Tune on it. It's got a bunch of little things that I just like about the car, A-pillar gauges, and, a couple of fun things. It's black, too, which is,
The best color, obviously.
We'll see. It's not fun to maintain, that's for sure.
If it was your choice and there was an open checkbook, what would you do to your car?
Open checkbook? Oh, race car daily. You really shouldn't, daily a race car, but race car daily. 1,000 horsepower boxer, just to have fun. Even though those don't really, they do exist, but they don't exist for long. There's a bunch of different stuff you can do to modify the cars. It's just one of those vehicles that has a huge following behind it. And because of that, there's a massive aftermarket for it. You can buy complete engines, full suspensions, wheels, tires, you name it. There's probably at least a couple of manufacturers making the part you want, which is a benefit of having a mainstream car like what I have.
What's the name that you've given your car?
My car. So some of the cars that I own get names, and some of them just kind of become the name on them. So my nickname is Goob, Goob, and it's Goob's Subaru. So really, it's just there is no name other than the fact it's just kind of become just that. It is the Goobaroo.
I do have to admit, being that it's a Subaru, being that it's a narrow body sedan Subaru, it is a very nice looking car.
It looks pretty alright.
I appreciate it for what it is, and I appreciate what you've done to it. Why did you go down the route that you've gone down so far?
Well, originally, I didn't even want the car. When we were originally looking, so my now wife and I believe we were engaged at that point in time. We had $5,000 to go buy a car for me to daily, and I wanted something that was fun. I wanted a fun daily to drive and something that was at least going to be somewhat reliable. I am a mechanic by trade, so my definition of reliable and other people's definition of reliable are probably very different, because I'm willing to put the sweat equity in to fix some stuff that might not be really reliable. But I don't even remember what your question was, to be honest. I rambled.
Why you went down the route that you went down?
Why did I go down that road? So really, it was because of the price. I was able to get my car for exactly $5,000, and the reason we bought that one was it just had this massive pedigree of maintenance and people really caring about it before I bought the car. So even though it wasn't the exact year I wanted, it wasn't really I do really like the black car, but I was looking at other colors as well for vehicle at the time. I bought that one because it just fit. It's really what it was at the end of the day, and sometimes that's just how you end up getting into cars and modifying them. Is this just the one you have or the one that you just happen to acquire? My car, with me, you can see, or at least a little bit you can see on the left, there's not much done to the outside of it compared to a stock one. There really isn't. But I don't know, it just makes me happy. It looks good.
I like the headlights that you put on these.
Yes.
On this car. It's a little bit lower. Yes, you put lowering springs on it.
It has lowering springs. It actually, coilovers waiting to go on. Just, they're hand-me-downs from a friend, but...
Well, we'll definitely be doing some content on that you can check out on the channel.
Yeah.
But...
And it's fun.
Moving forward here...
We need to talk about yours. So, I mentioned a little bit that my car has a lot of aftermarket support, and it's got a big following behind it. Jake's car, on the other hand, you can't really say that for either category with his car. What do you have, by the way, Jake?
I have this beauty right here, a 2008 Scion TC RS 4.0. It has a 2.4 liter inline-4 2AZ FE engine out of a Camry. It has a shorter ratio 5-speed transmission. Decent for acceleration. Doesn't have a lot of power to work with to begin with. It's not a very good handling car despite being a two-door coupe because it has a glass roof, which is a beautiful panoramic sunroof. If you're just cruising along, if you try to drive this car fast, especially if you give it more power, it will bite you. They have a very high rate of being totaled. I see a lot of them smashed to pieces, whether that's the driver's fault or not, I don't know. But I've always loved Toyota, so I'm trying to bring some of the things that made the 90s sports cars of Toyotas so special into the 2000s with their replacement models. So currently I have a supercharger that is out being rebuilt by John Bond Performance. You can find them at their website at johnbondperformance.com. And it was pretty rough. I got it pretty cheap, secondhand. Right now it's being powder coated. Everything's being replaced. All OEM or
everything being the bearings and the compressor wheel and
correct. It's
stuff
actually
along those sorts.
It's getting a billet compressor wheel that they make in-house. It supposedly saves an ounce of rotational weight. It increases its RPM, therefore its CFM, and the bearings they use are better for higher RPM as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your car, this supercharger is a centrifugal style, so it kind of looks like the turbo on the one end of it is a good way of putting it.
It does. It is the TRD supercharger that was sourced from Vortec. It allegedly, according to Vortec, is capable of 20 psi. So if I can squeeze anything close to that out of that supercharger, I think it will have been a success.
So while you're pulling that up, I got another question for you. So you kind of talked a little bit about why you chose that car, but another thing a lot of people might ask is you also said it has a Camry engine in it.
It does.
Is it any particular reason for that? Was it just what you had, or?
So the Camry engine it came in it factory, but it was a variant. It had a different timing cover. Mine actually has a Camry engine in it because the car that I bought was making some noise out of the engine compartment, and being that they're known for burning oil and spinning bearings, I didn't want to take a chance because it ran when I bought it. So I put together two engines and made them into one. Both engines had failed previously. I used only the finest of Rock Auto's economy parts to put them together, just so I could get the car on the road and see, is this a car that's worth me keeping and doing things to? So I drove it. Gabe drove behind it.
It's really loud.
I feel bad for his ears. But I have decided that I think I can make it work. So another thing that is farther down the line as far as plans go is what I'm picturing right here, and that is a compound charge setup on this vehicle.
So compound charge being you have a turbo and you have a supercharger at the same time on the same engine.
Exactly.
And they both work.
They both work.
Okay.
And they utilize the best aspects of both to create a much more level and, I'd say, probably a more predictable power band. But it may cause the opposite, given that it's a centrifugal supercharger and a turbo. So we may see that I need to spin the supercharger a little bit faster just to get the boost sooner so that I can make this system viable. But that's a little bit further down the road. I'd like to get the engine squared away the right way, put the supercharger on it, and see what the car is capable of.
Was there any particular reason, Jake, you bought the TC that you have right now? Like, why did you buy a 2008 RS 4.0?
I bought that car because the body is mostly clean, and it was $1,300. And it was within 50 miles of where I live.
That's a pretty good reason for buying it. I can't really blame you on that.
So, yeah, I bought the car. I brought the car home. I registered the car, and then I started going to work on it. I acquired some engines from a local mechanic, and from there, I just started learning about engine disassembly and reassembly.
And now, just so everybody gets a little context on this too, when he bought this car, we learned later, it had a pretty good spun rod.
Yep, I was correct. So if we hop into the shorts, you can see the sort of carnage that happened with this motor. I don't have any audio for you. You'd have to go for the audio. But no, sorry, I'm not trying to show you my brother's car yet. But I did put a big brake kit on it, pulled the engine. The engine coming apart. There's my beautiful headlights. The engine coming apart. This is cylinder number 4.
Now, it's not supposed to do that.
Nope. The tolerance between those pieces is much smaller than you would even know.
Clunking back and forth.
So
now, how long did you drive around with that engine that you just pictured there?
I put 1,000 miles on the car after I bought it.
That's fucking great.
Before I took the motor out of it. So, yeah, go for Toyota.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had another one of those cars that also had a rod bearing that was, we'll say, making a little bit of noise.
Little bit more noise, yes.
And that one didn't make it 1,000 miles, did it?
No, that one didn't make it 20 miles.
And now, this isn't to rip a Band-Aid, but this is another fun one you have to hear about. So, just because they all go, just because they all knock doesn't mean they're all going to make it 1,000 miles.
Right, so I thought I could drive this car home, and full disclosure, yes, I got caught, and yes, I spoke to the authorities about it, and we're good. This car
being a different TC you had bought for a particular reason, right?
I bought this car because it had so many period-correct aftermarket parts on it that I couldn't say no to it, because I bought this car for less than $2,000 as well.
Okay.
So it had an upgraded fuel pump, it had an upgraded billet fuel rail, upgraded injectors, it had a turbo kit, it had an intercooler kit, it had a relatively middle-of-the-ground sort of AFR and boost combo gauge. There was a head unit in it, a cool shift knob in it. Yeah. There was a bunch of things about it.
Fun little accessories and whatnot with it.
So driving home, this car starts making some serious noise after I stopped at McDonald's and got order number 666.
Oh man, I didn't know that portion of the story.
Yeah, my receipt printed and I looked at it after we had stopped and everything had been going okay. And I went, oh no. And after that, I ate my food, and we left, and it wasn't too far from that McDonald's that this engine finally just quit. And
he was actually on the phone with me at the time, and he said something along the lines of, like, oh, man, that's not supposed to make that noise. I got to call you back. Hang it up, and then the next phone call I hear is, can I use your trailer?
So, yeah, I knew it had a problem. Because I had driven a car that had a substantial engine issue, I thought I could get away with it, and I did not. So,
lesson learned.
Bring a trailer.
Yep.
Bringatrailer.com. Great place to go.
Yeah.
Not a sponsor, but awesome website.
No free ads.
No free ads. Just the first one. First one's free.
First couple. We'll give a couple. Why not?
Sure. So, long or the short, we get the car back. I take it apart. I take all these parts out. I now have a storage unit. completely full of parts ready for this supercharger build. So hopefully,
it's going to be fun.
All things considered, it should be a fun little car.
And now the goal is also, so we're talking compound charged, we're talking you want to spin it faster, more RPM in particular. Now, you also want to make it all-wheel drive as well, because your car is front-wheel drive from the factory.
It is front-wheel drive. So the Scion TC stands for Touring Coupe. It's probably one of the dumbest denominations Toyota's given a vehicle ever. But that vehicle was the replacement for the legendary Toyota Celica. And the Celica in the 90s, if people are fans of rally, know that it came with the GT4 all-wheel drive system. Given that the wheelbase and the engine layout and the transmissions are so similar that there's actually been GT4 swaps done on Scion TCs. Oftentimes, they'll use the 3S GTE engine that came in the Celica, but given, again, that the engines share a history with the 5S FE, I can make it work with the engine that's in it now. So,
okay. So all-wheel drive, compound charged TC. I like it.
I think it'll work.
And this is obviously, you asked me the question of open checkbook. I'm assuming this is your open checkbook goal with your car. Though.
This would be my open checkbook goal.
Oh, geez, I guess I need to. My description was lacking. I got to try that again.
There's other ideas that would work as well. Would probably scratch the itch, so to speak. But for now, that's the working theory.
So I guess we have some background on our cars, a little bit of touch, what we want to do with the podcast. But where I guess the next thing we could talk about, being on our first thing here, is why cars, or what we do with cars, how we got into cars. I guess with my personal background, I've been playing with stuff that has engines in it pretty much as long as I can remember. I took high school in my automotive shop class for 3 years. I was the president of our Skills USA chapter for my senior year of high school. I have a degree in automotive and high performance automotive from the University of Northwestern Ohio. I was in the class of 2019. And I just work on cars. I currently work for a company called New England Vehicle Outfitters. Our primary thing is we actually build police cars. We're an upfitting shop, but we also are working on branching into the aftermarket. We do stuff like lift kits, and we'll modify people's cars. I've, cut the sides of Tacoma's bedsides off and like their front bumpers to add off-road bumpers. We've done all, just you name it. We've done a bunch of cool stuff. Actually, there's the website there. There were some of the things, unfortunately our website is a little bit out of date. I wasn't actually here I didn't actually work for the company when a lot of the stuff you see was done, but I did do some of the stuff, and it's a fun company. This is what I do every day, basically. There you go. I actually did that one there. It doesn't really look like it, the one previous to that. There you go. So something not very, it's not something you see every day, and it might look like it's stock, but that's actually a lifted Jeep Compass, and that's actually a manual one as well, which is, you don't really see those. It's kind of a cool little vehicle. It has 31.5-inch tall tires. It's just fun.
Now, is that an all-wheel drive vehicle?
It is, actually, yes.
Okay.
Yep, that is an all-wheel drive one.
I totally get it then.
Yeah, it's just for fun. So actually, that picture there, these are some of the bosses and whatnot. That Ram on the Edge, that was one that was done previous to me. The Tundra and the Jeep are no longer with the company. Those have been sold off. The Jeep was actually much more modified after that picture as well. But
his current Gladiator is pretty decked out, though, isn't it?
He does have a Gladiator. As a Rubicon Gladiator, which is very, very cool.
Now, is the Instagram page for that? What's the handle for that? Is it available?
It's
on this website primarily.
I think you can see it somewhere. But yeah, we do. So this is an outdated car now, but that was the previous generation of the Ford Interceptor utility. So when you go to the dealership as a civilian and you buy an Explorer, you buy an Explorer. When you go as a town or as a municipality to go buy a car. You buy it as a Interceptor utility, which is just a gutted interior. It has vinyl floors, and I mean, there isn't anything on it, except for the spotlight. They do come with spotlights usually. But besides that, anything you see on a police car is usually done by somebody. So, kind of a fun thing.
I remember playing with the spotlights just to make sure they worked during my PDI process when I worked at the Ford dealership.
Well, you have to.
You absolutely have to.
You always got to play with police cars. It's always fun to make them go wee-woo.
They do lots of stuff at Nevo. They're a really cool company.
Yeah.
They do mutual events with the company that I work for. So
yeah,
it's really neat that we both ended up in this industry. We've been best friends since we were young, and now our companies are even close to one another, which is fascinating. But
so how exactly did you get into cars then?
So, a little background on me. I was a sports management major at a local university, and I decided that a regular 4-year institution wasn't for me because obviously simultaneously, halfway across the country, my best friend was at a high-performance technical school.
Building race cars. I got a degree in making shit go fast.
So I was sitting in a tiny dorm room with my roommate, who I was good friends with, and even then, we just found most of our time was spent looking at cars we liked, wishing I was working on my car to fix it, wishing I was doing cool things to my car, and then talking to him on the phone about all the things he was currently doing to his vehicles, which even if it was just basic maintenance, still, it was just a thing that he was doing that I couldn't do. And
I was turning wrenches at the end of the day.
I thought, you know what? Maybe I should give this a try because I was dead set against doing it. He had told me that I should do it, and I said no.
For years, too.
I was always big in the math classes. I did some of the trade classes. I learned metal fabrication at the first level, honors level, but that was really the extent of... I didn't take small engines. I didn't do anything like that. But I found a job listing, and I went and I got my hands dirty in a tire shop, and it's all history from there. I've been in the industry for going on my 6th year now. I have 5 ASE certifications to my name. I work for a major manufacturer in a dealership setting, and for me, it's been a good living for me, and I've learned a lot about cars along the way, so much so that I have the confidence of, whereas before I could only do an oil change, I can pull an engine and transmission in a day and have it back in before the next day, and then have it running shortly thereafter, which, many experienced technicians will say is still too long, but at the same time, they have been doing it a lot longer, and I think I'll get better.
I also like to revel at the fact that when you go and do that stuff, I mean, part of one of the reasons that I do this is the instant, not instant, you're working for it. I mean,
absolutely.
But it's the gratification of, bringing a car in that the customer says has a problem. You take that car, figure out what the problem is, figure out how to fix the problem, then fix it for them, and you get the gratification of taking a car that didn't work properly, and then it leaves working, which I just enjoy that. It's problem solving at its square.
It gives me so much enjoyment to see that, but the same can be said for if you think you have properly repaired a vehicle and then it turns out that maybe your repair wasn't sufficient and then it comes back. Nothing is worse than that, in my opinion. Like, I can have a bad day where I don't make a lot of money, but at the end of that day, if I fix problems like that to completion and I still have my sanity about my ability to fix a vehicle, I feel better about that, regardless of what the end result is financially. It's more important for me that customer has a positive experience and they maintain their faith in the vehicle that they drive, because next to housing, transportation is the highest cost and probably the thing we do the most other than work in this country. So
you spend a good chunk of your life in a car. A lot of people do.
Right.
I mean, to a degree, I almost choose to. I like taking the back road. I like taking the long way around,
Hey, you can't race a house, okay?
You can live in a car, though.
Exactly. So, for me, it's just important on, a moral level as well to not put people in harm's way, which is very important.
Oh, absolutely. It's pride of work. It's quality of work. It's really unfortunate because the industry that we both work in, and even though we're on opposite ends of the industry, just in you working on the mechanic side, or not mechanic, dealership side of things, and you do flat rate, whereas I work in the aftermarket side and am hourly. So I mean, really, our jobs are pretty much as bipolar within the same industry as they possibly could be. Man, I just went to a tangent and I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay. So, other things that we like to modify too aren't just cars. Like, we can talk a lot more about cars, but we also mentioned...
We just modify stuff.
We really like snowmobiles.
Yeah, that's kind of where the passion came from to begin with.
It did, because they're smaller engines, they're smaller parts, there's less of them, and they're easier to get your hands on.
Two-stroke is it's an easier concept of running, less moving parts, and it's I had a interesting childhood, I think is a good way of putting that.
Yeah, that's adequate.
I have some very interesting parents, in a good way. I absolutely adore my parents, but they gave me the opportunity of, when I found out that I really liked working on engines, my dad basically was like, all right, if you like working on them, let's get as many as we possibly can. So there you go. That's one of the old projects we did as teenagers.
That's me, by the way,
yeah,
Jake.
That's Jake on there. That is the sled that we famously named El Diablo, because it was the demon. The first time we started it, it stood in a wheelie and ran away from us. Luckily, we had our tether on, so it shut off. But I grew up with lots of snowmobiles. I mean...
Understatement of the century.
When I say lots, I mean hundreds of snowmobiles on our property.
At one time.
Yeah, we're not talking like overall. I mean, I think the most we had on our property at one point in time, when I was in my early teenager years, was probably around 200. And I mean, you couldn't walk around the property without finding a sled, seriously. I mean, it was fun. It was awesome. But being in the Northeast, that's just what we like to do. We have snowmobiles. And hell, we have lots of them. Why not? It all started really with my dad and I taking our sleds out on the trails, and we saw an old sled and went, we want that one. We want to get one just like that. We want to ride an old sled around. And then one turned to two to four to 300. Well, but,
that's where I got hooked, because by the time
this kid being my best friend, obviously, and coming over.
Yeah, we got reacquainted when we were in middle school, so when I went over to his house, they had a lot of these snowmobiles already. It wasn't at the max of its...
I just put that together. We did kind of reconnect at the same time we started doing sleds. That's very interesting. I never thought of that.
So when you were racing, I didn't really understand what that meant until I came over and we were doing that stuff and going through your yard to the various snowmobiles of similar makes and models and taking parts from those snowmobiles to go fix the race sled.
Yep.
And then we'd have 2 or 3 of them running, and we'd ride them around until one broke, and then we'd fix it with another sled.
Or we'd say, screw it, and go pull another one out of the pile and make that one run.
Exactly, because that one had less wrong with it than the one we just broke. So it was just this constant thing, and that's where I got my first one. I bought this snowmobile from Gabe's dad this was my first one, and they were you would never have a better buying experience. If you went over there and bought this snowmobile, being me, we took it in the garage that night, took the carburetors out of it, took the whole fuel system out of it, replaced all the fuel lines, cleaned the carburetors, cleaned and rebuilt the fuel pump. We went through the whole thing, filled it with fresh gas, and coincidentally that night it snowed 2 feet of fresh powder.
What a great day.
The first time I ever rode a snowmobile was in fresh, deep snow. Now, my snowmobile here is a 1990 Polaris Indy 500. It is not a long track. It is not good in deep snow, but man, is it fun. It doesn't weigh very much, and that's what it has going for it, because it'll still lift itself up in the powder just a little bit. So we could even play Chris Brandt a little bit in his backyard, because we felt like we were on a long track mountain sled, because it was so underpowered and it was such a more flat terrain, but there was little hills, so it kind of matched. It worked.
Rolly enough hills in the back. We could do a little bit of side hilling and, just have fun on them, really.
I'm ashamed to say that's what the snowmobile looks like right now. I still have it, though. and I have a new seat cover for it. The foam for the seat is good. I plan on bringing this thing back to its glory because it is a beautiful, amazing snowmobile, and I didn't pay a lot for it. And
35-year anniversary too, which is kind of a cool thing for that sled.
Yep, 35-year anniversary edition, which I am kind of now obsessed with the anniversary edition snowmobiles, as I have a XC700 that is also a 45-year anniversary. That one is a blast. That one has a trail can on it. That can be found on my personal page. There's a video of me riding that thing around.
So I just happened to notice we were talking about your Indy 500, and I see a picture. It's coincidentally, it's also you on my sled in this case, but that's actually my Indy 500. That's the one that we like to refer to as my race sled. That is a 1989, just regular Indy 500. Has a Fuji 500 twin. I'm saying 500 a lot. It's actually the 488 liquid. And I've done not much suspension and stuff work to that sled yet, but the one thing I've done that's very cool to that is I've added launch control, basically. So I went through and built my whole entire own custom wiring harness. I wired in this specific module that I was able to get for it. There's a button up on your left-hand side of your handlebar. And basically you get on the sled, press the button, hold it wide open, and it will sit right before the clutches engage. And when it's party time, you just let go of the button and away you go. And it dead hooks on ice. It's really fun.
As you can see, it does sick little wheelies.
It does the best wheelie a wedge can do.
Yep. Especially a wedge with a 488 liquid.
Yes.
Plastic skis certainly help, and me being heavy also helps, but look at that. That is stellar.
I've also done, just pull it up one more time. I've also put the tack on the handlebars, and the other thing you can't see in the picture is those handlebars are actually off of a later sled, and I cut the steering columns of the two sleds and actually built in approximately a 3-inch bar riser without actually putting a block in it. It's the column just sticks 3 inches out further than it used to.
Yep. So this sled is actually a snowmobile that I went and bought myself and then sold to Gabe's dad. So because I still had my Indy, I thought, hey, you know what? You gave me a great deal on that. I'm going to go get this because it's going to be fun. And I'll give you a good deal on this one because that's what people do for one another. But now,
through some wheeling and dealing, I acquired it, and now it is what it is.
So this being restored also will probably end up with a similar launch control system because anything that could be better than one
launch control sled is 2 for 100.
Exactly.
Everyone we own, hopefully at some point.
If it has a CDI, we can make it have launch control.
Yep.
And he will build a custom harness for it, so hit him up.
Yeah. Why not?
So I guess that kind of puts a pretty good overlay on what we're trying to do here.
Modcast, that was us. We want to talk about, anything going on in the car world, anything related to modifying.
We can
introduce our cars. I mean, I have other cars, you have other vehicles, but that's stuff we can talk about later.
Sure.
Really, the primary ones are probably the Scion and the WRX for us too.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of friends that will probably get on here. I think I mentioned before, your brother's got a really cool car. Both of my brothers have pretty cool cars, actually.
I'll pull up a...
In their own right, everybody has their own definition of what they like for a modified car, for what they do. Really,
sure.
I think...
That's kind of the point, though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just sometimes there's some hate on levels of modified and what people call modified. And really, what I want to convey is, as long as you're modifying it and, doing something to make it your own and make it so you like it more, why wouldn't you do it? Don't listen to anybody else. Do what you want.
It's not like I'm driving your car every day.
No, absolutely not. And hell, when you drive my car, you don't really even like Subarus. When you drive my car, you like it. I don't really even like Toyotas, Scions, but I really like your car,
Exactly. And that's probably because we want similar things out of our cars, so we're just showcasing more or less what each one can do in its own specific right. It's like when you go to a Grid Life Drift event and there's a multitude of different types of cars and engines out there. They're all doing the same thing with a different thing. And that's what makes car culture so cool, because it's a diversified sort of approach to a similar idea. And that is important for everybody, I think.
I would agree.
Well,
As long as we're modifying, we're doing all right.
so this is us.
Yeah.
We're the
Modcast.
Modcast.
Version 1 logo. Maybe we'll come up with another one. Maybe we won't. I kind of
And,
dig that one, though.
I do dig that one, and I mentioned Grid Life.
I like the Volvo
so
in the back.
Pete the Slow Noma, a friend of ours.
This is a buddy I met in college, but is also a New Englander like us. He's somebody you'll probably hear from in the future. It's a great, great fun truck.
Very cool car. We'll let him talk about it, though.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that concludes our show
I
for
think
today.
This was the Modcast.
This was the Modcast.
I think actually successful episode number 1 as well. So
I'm Jake.
I'm Gabe.
Signing
Have a
off.
good night.